Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Big Blue Banter podcast. I am Nick Falato, and Dan Schneier, unfortunately, is not here to join me to talk to the great Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus, their lead NFL draft analyst and the co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast with Connor Rogers. He's handsome, he's got a great camera, usually, and always quick with the football knowledge. Trev, how you doing?
Nick, I'm doing fantastic, man. I appreciate you having me back on the show. Excited to talk a little Giants ball with you here.
Little Giants ball, little NFL. It's going to be a lot of fun. But Trevor, I got to ask you the hard-hitting questions to start, okay? Did you like Darren Waller's recent song?
I mean, it's obviously going to win a Grammy. Nomination. I mean, we're not even talking at this point. I mean, we're talking a runaway for him winning Grammy. He is expressing himself in a way that makes him happy, and I'm happy for him. I don't know if I'm going to be buying any Darren Waller albums anytime soon, but it's what he wants to do with the rest of his life.
I can't fault him for that. It is just so damn frustrating, not because of Darren Waller's going through something, but two New York Giants pass catchers in recent memory have went and turned into rappers all of a sudden. And it's just like,
wait, who is the other one?
Kadarius Toney, who the Giants couldn't wait to get rid of, but he ended up going down the rap path as well. And ironically enough, the pick the Giants received from the Chiefs for Kadarius Toney was in turn used to draft to the Vegas Raiders to get Darren Waller. So it's just ironic, man.
Wait, so who did the Raiders use on it? Because that means whoever that is having a rap career, you know?
Might have a rap career, and I don't have that off the top of my head. So
we gotta look this up at some point. I don't know if we'll do it on the show, but after the show, I got whatever pick it was, I gotta look up who this draft selection was.
Oh, this will be a callback. We're gonna figure that out.
They're going off in the rap career.
They're definitely going off in the rap career. But let's get into Darren Waller here for a second, Trevor.
Yeah.
He just retired. The Giants gained a little bit north of 11 million on the cap. They have, I think, 2.9 million in dead cap, which is reflected in that number, 4.9 million next year's cap. So right now, the Giants roughly have 12.7 million, if that math is correct. So I want to ask you from an outsider's perspective, what do you think Joe Schoen and the Giants should do with that extra money? Are there any free agents, specifically cornerbacks, interior defensive linemen, maybe a cheap running back that Joe Schoen and the New York Giants should look to add to this roster?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of any off the top of my head, just because a lot of, like the draft will happen and a lot of the focus for guys that are getting added to the roster are much more like undrafted free agent types of players. And so I can't think of anybody who's really a major holdover. I might be forgetting somebody that's a big time glaring name, but yeah, I think for the Giants specifically, you're probably looking at a scenario where you're going to want to get through minicamp. You're going to want to get into training camp. And it's not the worst thing in the world to hold on to that money and see, okay, is somebody going to go down in training camp where we might be able to make a bigger move or something like that? Or maybe it's even like at the deadline, you're at a situation where, okay, we're more at a tipping point than we thought. We're right there with the division. Let's go for it. Sign a bigger name player, use some of that cap that we have there to be able to go get maybe a bigger name, somebody that could really help us. Because I can't really think of anybody off the top of my head that is available right now that's a obvious, like, yeah, you got to go get this type of a player. I think anybody that's still available right now, probably still available for a reason. So I don't think that you're just going to jump into, okay, Waller finally retired, let's really utilize that cap. And honestly, I don't think that you're going to see them make that move, because if we're being honest, NFL teams are privy to a lot more information, obviously, than we are. With Waller retiring, they probably had a good idea that this was coming, right? Especially because his decision of whether or not to retire was lingering so long. It felt like the longer that this was going to be a no decision, that in turn was almost a decision itself, to where, okay, we're almost in the middle of the summer now. And it's like, all right, well, if you aren't fully committing to playing at this point, we're pretty much going to move on without you. And I think that that's what the Giants have probably been doing behind the scenes for a while. They've had both plans, there's no doubt, but I think they've been moving forward with the plan that he's not going to be available. So I don't think it's a big change for them. And I also don't think that you're going to see them immediately turn that cap space and that money around. I think they're going to wait on it a little bit and see what their team is like in training camp.
I think that's a really good point. And just to let you know, future Grammy winning rap artist Trey Tucker, 100th overall pick in the 2023.
All right. I'm glad that answer went as long as it did. So you can look that up for Trey Tucker. So shout out to Trey Tucker. Buy the stock now.
Buy the stock now, everybody. Invest. The Giants also have options behind Darren Waller at the tight end position. It's one of the reasons why I didn't mention tight end as an option. I mean, you have Daniel Bellinger. A lot of Giant fans, including myself, are high on Daniel Bellinger. He's a above average blocker, and I think he's a solid receiving option. But I want to ask you, since I know you cover the NFL draft, what were your thoughts on Penn State tight end Theo Johnson? And how do you think he can kind of come in here, and how much playing time would he earn behind Daniel Bellinger? And what is this opportunity like now that Darren Waller is no longer on the team?
Well, certainly, I think that those tight end 2 reps are there for the taking, right? I think that if Waller was on the team, and, Waller is more of a receiver than a traditional tight end. So there was certainly a world where like Bellinger and Darren Waller would have been on the field at the same time, plenty. But now you're probably streamlining it a little bit more. But I also think that, those Waller reps where he's coming from the slot, I actually think that Theo Johnson might take a handful of those snaps, because when you look at his Penn State tape, the alluring part of him is that size and speed matchup that he presents. I mean, I'm just looking at his mock draftable chart right now, and it's over 6'6", 92nd percentile, 270 pounds. That's 75th percentile. But I mean, for a receiving type of tight end, I mean, that percentile is even higher. He was 91st percentile in 10-yard split, 91st percentile in 40-yard dash, 96th percentile in vertical jump, 93rd percentile in broad jump. So not only is this guy huge, he's a crazy athlete. So those are percentiles for the entire tight end position. Those aren't even weight adjusted. And when I watched Theo Johnson, there were people who said, okay, he could be a 2nd-round pick. I was more towards, I thought he was going to be like a priority day 3 type of guy, because he just his game and his tape, I should say, was not as well rounded. Now, if you were projecting what he could be as a big athlete, sure, I could understand late 2nd, early 3rd round. That was a little rich for me, but even for what he is in his current state, it's useful, especially with Darren Waller no longer on the team, because the way that I saw him potentially being utilized is truly this mismatch player where, one, if the defense you're going up against is using a much smaller corner to particularly man their slot players, you just play 500 with them, right? I mean, like, just throw them jump balls. I mean, a lot of that stuff is going to be pretty easy for Theo Johnson if you're going up against a smaller corner. Now, if you're going up against maybe a linebacker or a safety, somebody who can match up with him a little bit more with strength and length, well, then all of a sudden now that athleticism comes into play. Now this is somebody who could be a seam player, who could go right up the middle of the field, who you can feed balls between the linebacker and the safety level, somebody that can consistently attack over the middle. And I think that that's really where his value is going to come from. How much they are going to put him in those situations, I think, is to be seen. Kind of depends how quickly he's able to really hit the ground running, how much he's able to get his confidence down. But in terms of, an outlook for Theo, with Waller coming back, I felt like Theo Johnson really was not going to get much playing time at all this upcoming season. But with Waller now retired, Johnson, to me, is somebody who I think can really feed into those streamlined slot receiver roles where Bellinger can be more of that kind of do-it-all tight end for you. He could be in slot, he could be in line, but some of those vertical slot routes, which we know Darren Waller could have run, you can put Theo Johnson in that spot, and I think that his athleticism and his size make it very alluring there.
Plus, in the run game, having a 260-pound tight end split out in the slot a little bit might give you an advantage if they do choose to use a smaller nickel, 190, 195 pounder. So could help you out in the run game as well. And look, I look at the Giants tight end room right now. They added Jack Stoll as well from the Philadelphia Eagles and Chris Manhertz. And if you watch Chris Manhertz play, that last name is very apt, because that dude loves to just block his ass off. And this is very welcomed for the New York Giants, because last year they added Darren Waller. We were all excited about the tight end room. But if you remember, in week 4, I think it was a Monday Night Football game against the Seattle Seahawks, the Giants had almost a bye week, essentially, because they played on Thursday Night Football in week 3 against the San Francisco 49ers. And the Giants offense came out and they were completely stagnant. And everyone's like, what? You had all this time to prepare. Why is the New York Giants offense looking terrible? Well, it was because Daniel Bellinger actually got hurt on that first drive with tush push along with John Michael Schmitz, which left the Giants tight end room with Darren Waller and freaking Lawrence Cager, who was a former Georgia wide receiver.
Right.
So Darren Waller was forced to block the entire game. So everyone's like, where the hell is Darren Waller? Why isn't he getting any? It's because the Giants took so many calculated risks that blew up in their face. And one of those calculated risks was entering the season with 3 tight ends, 2 of them being former wide receivers. So I'm so glad to see Joe Schoen go out there, add Manhertz, add Stoll, and then draft Theo Johnson. And that really helps now that Darren Waller is no longer there. So it's good to see Joe Schoen learn from some of his previous mistakes. But I have to pivot here a little bit to the running back position. And look, Giant fans, we've had a running back room since 2018 that has revolved around Saquon Barkley. So this is a little bit different from something that we're used to. And now he's enjoying steak bread and a freaking broken bell over there in Philadelphia. Good at him. I have no animosity for him doing what's best for him, but come on, man. Now we got to watch you twice a year, probably rip the Giants a new, never mind. Anyways, I want your opinion on Devin Singletary as a running back and what you think his role might be.
I think it's a high floor with Devin Singletary, which is kind of what you want, right? I mean, it's hard to like one in, one out. Okay, Saquon Barkley's going to another team. Now, obviously, we're going to either draft or sign an incredible running back that's going to come in, and it's just going to be a one in, one out. Like, it was kind of funny what happened with the Green Bay Packers, where it was like, okay, well, Aaron Jones is sticking around. And then they signed Josh Jacobs, and they're like, this is the best running back room of all time. And it's like, no, actually, Aaron Jones is actually, we're getting rid of Aaron Jones as well. But you don't often have that, okay, Aaron Jones is out, Josh Jacobs is in. Like, it's just a 1-and-1 for these 2 backs who are both like top 10 in the league. So with Saquon leaving, you knew that it wasn't going to be, okay, easy to project the same sort of ceiling. But for Singletary, especially getting reunited with Brian Daboll, like, to me, the floor is high for that group, which is what you want, right? You couldn't have it be catastrophic post Saquon. Like what you mentioned with the tight end position, right? When Bellinger got hurt, the floor of that group just like fell like all the way down the elevator. And you could not let that happen in the run game. You needed at least somebody who understood the offense, understood the offensive coordinator, understood the offensive philosophy. And I think Singletary at least does that. So I don't think he's going to light the world on fire. I mean, there's a reason why he's kind of bounced around the league a little bit. But to me, his value is less in the ceiling and more in the dependability week in and week out. It's just like, he's not going to look lost back there. So that I think is really important, especially because you have 2 backs behind him who I think have higher ceilings, that you allow the team to sort of operate at an offensive level as the season begins. And then, like, if Tracy becomes this monster, boom, you can go right to him. And it's like, okay, the floor was already established. The foundation was there. Now we can put in a guy who's got a little bit higher of a ceiling. So that's how I view Singletary in the running back position right now.
Eric Gray last year, I think he got like 17 carries. The guy barely saw the field. And again, when the Giants drafted Eric Gray, they're like, if we have Saquon Barkley coming back now, so Eric Gray's not going to really earn many snaps. So what we have to do is try him out as a punt returner. Absolute disaster. Did not work out. Now he's going to have an opportunity. So I want to ask you, Trevor, can you juxtapose Eric Gray and Tyrone Tracy Jr.'s skill set and what you believe they may offer as the 1B or possibly 2 behind Devin Singletary?
Yeah, I like Eric Gray. I really do. I remember watching him when he was still at Tennessee, when I was doing summer scouting for him initially, which, God, I don't even remember what draft class that was at this point. But, I'd watched him at Tennessee and I was like, man, this dude can change direction very well at high speeds. And I was like, that's something that's really tough to teach, even with the great athletes that come through the position. Not everybody can really change direction at high speed the way that I saw Eric Gray do so when he was at Tennessee. Now, at Oklahoma, it wasn't quite the same. He wasn't as twitched up or explosive as a runner as I felt like when he was at Tennessee, but he had his most productive year there, that final year at Oklahoma. And I think things really started to come together for him. He started to see the field a little bit better. So I knew that athleticism was there. It's still kind of there for him, but obviously it's been quiet for him to start his NFL career. I feel as though, he is somebody who can make the most out of the space that is in front of him with how explosive that he can be. We just haven't seen it. And I don't know if it's just because he doesn't have as much confidence as he did when he was at Tennessee or what, but my eyes didn't deceive me. Like I saw that kind of athlete and that kind of player. I just haven't really seen it since. And unfortunately, we've got more years of not seeing that than we do seeing that. But I'm holding out hope that a streamlined, yes, you're the guy in this committee type of a role for Eric Gray is going to yield the best production that we have seen from him. So I do like him in that regard. Tracy is the player who, to me, is like the ultimate wild card for New York's situation. This is a former wide receiver who played wide receiver for most of his career when he was in college. I can't remember. It has escaped me. What was the school that he was at before Purdue? Do you know? Iowa. Thank you. It was
not exactly the dynamic firepower type of
the color black was in my head. I was just like, which school is it? Because I couldn't get Purdue out of my head, which is obviously where he came from when he was going through the draft cycle. So he was a wide receiver while he was at Iowa. Got some work there, but really not as much as he wanted to. Transfers over to Purdue. He's sort of this like, okay, well, is he a wide receiver? We really think he could be a great running back. But at that point in his career, understandably so, Tracy was like, all right, well, I got 1 year of college eligibility left. And if you tell me to switch positions and it doesn't work well, I will not go to the NFL. There's no chance that they will, that any team will take a chance on me, let alone draft me. But it was a calculated risk because his coaches said, you have the skill set of a running back. So he transfers, so he makes the switch over to running back in his final year. And it was his most productive and his best season for him to get drafted where he did and now have the opportunity that he does with the Giants. To me, he is among those three running backs that we mentioned, Devin Singletary, Eric Gray, and Tyrone Tracy. Tracy is the best playmaker of the bunch. Like, I think that he has got the best eye for space. I think he knows how to make guys miss. He turns into kind of this like backyard football type of a player once he really gets going and once he really gets in a groove and once he is confident. And then, of course, that receiver background is there for him. So if you want to keep him in on third downs or even if you're trying to run passes out of the backfield on early downs as well, he is going to give you the most natural hands. He's going to be the best separator. He's going to become that playmaker after the catch very naturally because some running backs aren't. Some running backs, they like catch the football and then they go like, okay, let me just either run forward or run out of bounds the way I need to, and we'll get to the next play. Tracy's somebody who's going to cut back inside. He's going to cut up field. He's going to get grass. He's going to get more yards. So I think that he actually has the highest ceiling of the three guys that we talked about there. And it's because of everything that he brings to the table, the natural playmaking ability, the receiving ability, and just the overall athleticism. So if he can really get confidence in training camp and in the early parts of the season, I think the second half of the year could potentially be all him. Like, they're just leaning on him. It's not that the other guys won't be involved, because in today's day and age, it is running back by committee for most teams in the NFL, but he could be their number one option in the backfield. I would not be shocked.
If he can prove to pass protect, and that's really what I would say affected Eric Gray and Saquon Barkley's presence as well. But in preseason, Eric Gray was really bad at pass protection. So I'm hoping both those players can learn and master the art of pass protection, and then that could earn them snaps, specifically Tracy on third down. And if he does learn that, then I think Brian Daboll would be inclined to use him in certain situations.
Do you ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
Look, Trev, I got to ask you, Malik Nabers, how excited should Giants fans be? And do you believe he has the potential to be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL?
The excitement should be high, and the answer is yes, like truly. And that is high praise, right? We're talking about guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. I mean, like, those are 5 right there. And there's so many great wide receivers that I didn't even name outside of that bunch. So to say that a guy can be a top 5 receiver, I mean, like, you got to be really damn good in this league. I mean, that's just where the league is going. There's so many great wide receivers, but Malik Nabers, in my opinion, has the skill set, the athletic talent, the gifts, the playmaking ability to be that and be in that conversation. So I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but truly, I think that this guy, when you look at this wide receiver group for the Giants, why wouldn't you feed the offense through him? I think he's going to have the best return on investment in any situation, whether he's on the line of scrimmage, off the line of scrimmage, in the slot, whatever it is. His movement skills are rare. His separation ability is rare. And I think that whether it's Drew Lock, whether it's Daniel Jones, they're going to see that in practice. And they're going to go, okay, well, if I need a completion, let me go to the guy that I think is going to be the most open most of the time. And to me, even as just a rookie, I think that's going to be Malik Nabers. So he is a player who I was extremely high on in this past draft class. And I think that he does have that like top 5 wide receiver potential to him.
And since he has that top 5 wide receiver potential to him, because I agree with you, I think it doesn't mean he's going to get there, but I think the potential is at least there. And there's only a finite amount of receivers who at least have that potential. What does that do for Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson and the 11 personnel package of the New York Giants?
Yeah, it should open things up a lot, right? Because I think for the Giants over the last couple of years, I feel like they have sort of been forced to play receivers in areas where they weren't most comfortable. Right? Like, by missing a true wide receiver 1 on the team, you're kind of asking everybody to sort of like punch above their weight class, right? And it's like, when you look at their depth chart, I like Darius Slayton as an off the line of scrimmage type of a flanker player. I like Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot. I like Jalen Hyatt as a field stretcher, vertical threat for you. But without a true wide receiver 1, well, okay, now Darius Slayton's got to kind of play on the line of scrimmage as an X. It's not as conducive to his strengths. Okay, well, now Wan'Dale Robinson's got to play more of an outside receiver role, maybe than you're comfortable with. Not that he can't do it, but like more than you're comfortable with. Okay, well, now we've got to ask Jalen Hyatt to not just be a vertical player, but like try to be a true all-around receiver. And it's just everybody, it felt like, was punching one weight class higher than what they really were, or trying to play a wide receiver spot, one spot higher than maybe what their true skill set and true return on investment would have been able to give you. Now that you have Malik Nabers as a wide receiver 1, to me, it truly frees up the other guys to be able to play in more situations where they just have skill set advantages, whether it is running deep or running over the middle or, like yards after catch opportunities, like whatever it is. So that was always the tough part for me with the Giants is even before they had Nabers, it's like, I don't hate the guys they have on their team. They're just being forced to do a lot of different things that they maybe shouldn't, or at least they're just not going to have a strong of a return on investment for because there was no wide receiver one to be able to take a lot of those, okay, do it all types of responsibilities or that chess piece that you could build a game plan around. So now I think that Nabers' presence, especially if he's able to hit the ground running and play very well early on, that does a lot to open up everything that they're going to use in their passing game.
And that's what Darren Waller was supposed to be. I mean, Joe Shane said as much, and Kenny Golladay before that. And it just starts to get, infuriating and nauseating. But you brought up Drew Lock and Daniel Jones before. So you're an outsider to the New York Giants. You cover the entire league. I got to ask you, Trevor, what is your honest opinion of the Giants quarterback room and the Giants quarterback situation right now?
Yeah, well, now that Daniel Jones has a beard, I think it's better. I like the beard look there from him. But no, I think that both of these guys can win games for you in this league. Just neither has shown that they've been able to sustain it, right? And I'm sort of out on the Daniel Jones experiment at this point, right? I mean, I think that, there were rumors that the Giants were trying very hard to get to number 3 overall to go get Drake May. I think there's a reason for that. I think that they set up their offseason and, bringing in Brian Burns and, setting things up the way that they wanted to with a lot of different additions. I should say like over the last 2 years, I think that would probably be a better representation. Like they fixed, well, I don't want to say fix, but you had questions along the offensive line. You bring in John Runyon, you bring in Jermaine Illuminor, you've got Aaron Stinney as well. Like you make some additions there. Like I mentioned, you trade for Brian Burns. And so they kind of did everything they needed to do to free themselves up to address the quarterback position if they were going to be able to do it. Now, they were picking at number 6. They knew that probably meant at least 3 quarterbacks were going to be off the board at that point. So your hands are a little bit tied with where your draft position is, even when you're in the top 10. But I think they were of the thought process of, hey, if we can upgrade the quarterback position, we're absolutely going to do it. And I think that they explored those options. And I think that's where the narrative is with this quarterback room, right? I mean, there was reluctancy of signing Daniel Jones, or I mean, maybe not from the organization, but at least on the outside, it was like, hey, you're in this situation where, yeah, you could sign him because I guess you kind of have to, but that's a pretty crappy reason to sign a quarterback, right? Like, because we feel like we have to. And that's what it felt like that they were in that situation with Jones when they gave him that extension. But now it obviously feels like, okay, there's one more year on that. It's a true prove it deal type of a thing. And we've got a lot of years under his belt where, oh man, I just had this stat. I don't want to mess it up, but I believe there's only been 1 year in Daniel Jones' career where he's finished with more big time throws than turnover-worthy plays. I think he's finished almost every single year of his career with more turnover-worthy plays than big time throws. And it's like, there aren't a lot of quarterbacks that get 2 years of that before they no longer have a starting job. And it feels like just because of the situation the Giants have been in, I think we're going into year 5 of Daniel Jones, and 4 of those years.
2019 he was drafted.
Yeah, so I mean, like now we're getting into that point where he's kind of just like, this is who he is at this point. So massive year for him, obviously, but I hope understandably, like I don't have a lot of faith in him to completely change the narrative that we've seen over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah, and I mean, Dan and I have that same opinion. Like my thing with Daniel Jones is he is a functional quarterback when he's playing on a rookie contract.
Yeah.
But when you make that investment, and I understand why Joe Shane and Brian Dable made that investment at the time, you are going to go all in. You need to expect a jump in play. And even in 2022, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know the Giants finished dead last in explosive plays. And we bring it up all the time on the podcast. And that means something. Dead last in explosive plays. They won a lot of close games, got a little bit lucky, but that is the NFL. But then you invested in Daniel Jones and everything kind of fell apart. And now the Giants are sitting here and they can get out of it, luckily, because they did build in that 2-year out with relatively unscathed, I guess you can say. And then I think you were spot on with your assessment about trading up for Drake May. That's what the Giants wanted to do, but they just couldn't manage it. And now they have their ducks in a row because they did Drew Lock to be an option if Daniel Jones isn't healthy, or if Daniel Jones ends up ultimately floundering, which we're hoping that does not happen. But I want to ask you a little bit about the defense. Look, Dexter Lawrence, this guy is one of the most unique talents in the entire NFL.
Yeah,
And
truly.
like he truly is. He's 346 pounds, and he is just so agile and so explosive and so powerful. And he just has been dominating centers over the last 2 years. And now we're transitioning to Shane Bowen's defense, which on passing downs is going to be wide nine. It's going to be split field coverages. So I want to ask, what does the addition of Brian Burns, who I feel like fits very well into that defense, similar to how Harold Landry did with the Tennessee Titans, what will the addition of Brian Burns do, along with Kayvon Thibodeau, for Dexter Lawrence in this wide nine passing down split field coverage Shane Bowen defense?
Look, no matter what you're running out of the base, or if you're staying more multiple with it, it's never a bad thing to add a player like Brian Burns. I mean, he's a very, very talented edge rusher. He can be a 3-point stance rusher. He can be a 2-point stance rusher. That wide nine stuff. I mean, that gives you more one-on-ones on the outside too, right? Because it's much more difficult. Because here's the thing, like if you're just thinking of, okay, alignment and reaction, now this is a perfect world, right? Like, let's just say you've got Dexter Lawrence. He's playing more of like a shade nose. He's right above the center. You've got 2 wide nine edge rushers, very far outside of the line of scrimmage. The other team is probably going to have a tight end to try to mitigate that line on the line of scrimmage. But let's even say that 5 offensive linemen, right? When you have one, but especially 2 wide nine edge rushers, it forces the offensive tackles to be really good athletes, really balanced, and be able to handle one-on-one situations. Because if you tell your guards, hey, we want you to cover more ground and try to protect the inside move of the rushers who are attacking from those wider alignments in Thibodeau and Burns, then you have less help for Dexter Lawrence. So like then it's like, and in reality, like, you need more help against Dexter Lawrence. You need more double team work with Dexter Lawrence than you do even trying to handle Kayvon and Brian Burns on the edges. So to me, wide nine alignments are sometimes tricky because they make you very susceptible to, okay, if we're checking into a run, there's less space, or there's more space in between you and whoever the closest interior defensive lineman is going to be. So it's a little bit tricky in that regard. But when you have a player like Dexter Lawrence, he can sometimes change the math for you, where you can get more aggressive. You can put those edge rushers in more one-on-one situations, and you're just hoping they win. The issue, I would say, with both Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns to this point in their career is that their one-on-one pass rush win percentage is not as good as their talent would tell you that it should be. Like Burns is somebody who he's had sacks in certain years, but like that win percentage for him is lower than what you would think. Because when you think of Brian Burns, like I think of, okay, one of the best young pass rushers in the NFL, and that just hasn't translated to a pass rush win percentage number. And with Thibodeau, it's kind of the same thing. Thibodeau just has not really ascended, like taken that leap to, okay, he really had a great pass rush win percentage number. We're still kind of waiting for that for him. So do more of these wider one-on-one opportunities allow these guys to win one-on-one more? Because we know they both have the talent level for it. We just haven't seen it as much in the schemes in the years that they've played over the last couple of seasons.
And that's what we're hoping. That's really what we're hoping for. This is a completely different defense at this point. I'm excited to see what Shane Bowen does and how he employs Dexter Lawrence specifically. I want to ask just a couple more questions. Thank you for being courteous with your time. The Giants still lack proven depth in their secondary. And on this podcast, and Giant fans just in general, we're big fans of Deonte Banks and what he can offer this team. But there really is no true solid cornerback too. Could be Cordell Flott. Could be Nick McLeod. They have the opportunities of a lifetime ahead of them. Yeah. But the Giants did select Andrew Phillips from Kentucky. And it looks like Joe Shane and Brian Dable and Shane Bowen are probably going to use him as their nickel, their slot player. So what was your opinion of Andrew Phillips from Kentucky? And do you think he can slide in as a natural nickel?
Yeah, it was interesting to me because when I heard that they were moving him to nickel, I was pretty surprised because Phillips played a lot on the outside when he was at Kentucky, and I thought he played a style that was really complimentary of Deonte Banks. Like, I loved Banks. I think he was a top 20 player for me in the previous year's class as well, because he was one of the best man coverage corners in the class. Now, I know that Wink's not there anymore. So it's okay, a little bit different. It might not be as aggressive with man coverage on the outside, but like to me, you had Deonte Banks on one side, you had Andrew Phillips on the other, who Phillips, I remember being super impressed with him when he was at the Senior Bowl because of how fearless he was as a press man coverage defender, whether he was going up against like Lad McConkey or whether he was going up against Johnny Wilson. Like it didn't matter, like size, shape, like what his skill set, it didn't matter. Like he was ready to press man cover and get hands on and turn and run with whoever it was. And I thought he did a really nice job, especially in that second day of the week in that situation. So I don't think he can't play in the slot, but it's surprising to me that they wouldn't pair those two with similar skill sets on the outside to give themselves the ability to say, hey, we're running 2-man here. Hey, we're running cover 0. Hey, we're running cover 1, like whatever it is. And just telling those two guys on the outside, man up, get in this guy's face. Don't let him catch the football. And you can still obviously sort of do that with Phillips in the slot, but it's not an easy as a call out. It's like, okay, we're like man on the outside. Like that's what we're playing here. Like whoever's kind of going out there, we got Phillips, we got Banks. They're going to play man on the outside. And with Flott, I felt like Flott's best years at LSU was with him in the slot. So to me, we'll see if it works out for them. Maybe they'll make a switch when it was in training camp. But to be honest with you, when I looked at the skill set and the successes of those two guys specifically, I would have had it flipped. But again, these are sort of the team-centric parts of the evaluation that we aren't as privy to on the outside of things. Maybe it was like, hey, we're drafting this guy with this kind of vision because of this reason, and we'll see if it comes to fruition for them. But in terms of what we've seen already from their tape, I felt like you would have flipped those two, and Flott would have stayed in the nickel, and Phillips would have played on the outside.
I wonder how much of it has to do with Cordell Flott's, I don't want to say inability, but he struggles against the run. I think that could be a reason.
And that's huge, right?
Yes.
Because and people forget about that when they think about slot corners. And that's a reason why one of the many reasons why I was so high on Cooper DeJean from Iowa is because, okay, we love to say that this guy can play slot corner or he could play outside corner, but when you play the slot, you are physically closer to the ball. You are physically closer to where any sort of run fit would be. So you've got to be a lot better at that. And I never worried about him because he was one of the best run defending corners that we had in the class, one of the best run defending corners that we've seen over the last couple of years. And so just to your point, I didn't mean to cut you off with it, but like that is a big reason why somebody could go, okay, you're better at covering in the slot, but if teams run to your side, you're getting blown off the ball. That can't happen because as much as it is a passing league, it starts by limiting what teams can do up front, and then you go from covering the pass from there.
Yeah, and with RPOs too, like you need to really be able to fit your run and do it very, very quickly if you are that nickel player and that read defender. Safety, Tyler Nubin. Do you like Tyler Nubin? Xavier McKinney, no longer a New York Giant. He is now in Green Bay. So what was your opinions of the Minnesota Golden Gopher, Tyler Nubin, and his ball skills?
Yeah, love him. I really do. He was my safety one in this past class. He was a top 32 player for me. He got a late first, early second round grade for me. I felt like he was being undervalued in the draft class simply because we looked at the safety class as a whole. And I think everybody was just like, yeah, it's a down safety year. It's like, yeah, okay, it's a down safety year, but like Tyler Nubin is still really good. And I know he didn't test super well, and I think that really scared people off with him, but I just tell them that there's plenty of players every year where you just go, I just turn on the tape, right? I mean, like we can't sit here and say like, oh, the combine, there's no pads, there's no cleats, there's no physicality, there's nothing like that, and then try to weigh that athleticism more than when we see the athleticism on tape. And for me, I saw the athleticism from Tyler Nubin on tape, especially because when you watch him, I have in his scouting report, like, you don't want him in cover one situations. You don't want him to be a center fielder, a single high safety. He doesn't necessarily have that range to get true, like middle of the field or opposite hash to the sideline. But in a two high system, can absolutely play deep in coverage. He can absolutely play half field coverages. And he's also fantastic in robber roles as well. So to me, he gives you so much versatility as a safety. He's got great ball skills. I think he anticipates very well where the ball is going and when to break on it. Sometimes that makes you look even faster than you are when you're already a step ahead, confidently getting to where the pass is being thrown. And I think there are a handful of examples in last year's tape from Tyler Nubin that showcased that. So to me, very versatile safety. And as long as you're not asking him to play cover one, I thought he was he was a back end of the first round, early part of the second round type of a player. I think the Giants got a really good one with Newman.
I agree with you. I was a big fan of Tyler Nubin as well. So, Trevor, before we get you out of here, got one more question I like to ask people who cover the NFL more broadly than Dan and I do. Who is your favorite offense and defense to watch and study in the NFL, and why?
Yeah, wow. That's a great question. Offensively, the first one that comes to mind is, I think the obvious answer is sort of like Shanahan, McVay, McDaniel, right? Because those guys are doing a lot of fun stuff. But I think my answer to that question would actually be an extension of that. And I'm fascinated with where some teams in the league are going with heavier personnel now. When I say that, I mean multiple tight ends on the field, not just 2, sometimes 3 tight ends on the field. And I specifically think about the Kansas City Chiefs, who they ran the second most passing plays from 12 and 13 personnel. And I think they ran the most passing plays from just 13 personnel last year. And it's like, whoa, okay, like heavier personnel, like what are the Chiefs doing? Are we getting back to like running the football that we always hear that like the game is very cyclical? Like, are we getting more towards like the beef on the line of scrimmage? I actually think that it's a evolution of what McVay did in, what year was this? 2016, 2017? Like when they made their Super Bowl run, McVay took the league by storm, running so many different plays out of so few condensed concepts. And they'd run 11 personnel a lot, right? They'd have 3 wide receivers on the field, but a lot of it would be like close condensed sets. It'd be like triangle formation, like a bunch formation, or it'd be like some stacks that are very close to the line of scrimmage. So it's like they can run a lot of different looks out of those plays, but they could also run the football. Like they also like had guys sort of close to the line of scrimmage and bunched up, and they got a lot of bodies there. So it truly made that RPO or audible kind of style of offense valuable and so very effective. And it wasn't until Bill Belichick in the Super Bowl was like, all right, I'm just going to load 6 guys in the line of scrimmage and that's it. I'm going to allocate everybody else to coverage and we're going to handle you on the line the way that we need to. It wasn't until that came around that people kind of started to find a blueprint for it. And I wonder if where we're going with heavier personnel, passing out of heavier personnel sets, I wonder if that's where the league is going as an evolution of that, to say, okay, we're still going to run a lot of plays out of not as many formations, but we're going to do so instead of in 11 personnel, 12 personnel, and 13 personnel, because there's so many great athlete tight ends now. Like tight end, we just had the Darren Waller and Daniel Bellinger conversation, and we talked about what Theo Johnson could be, right? Like there are so many tight ends now that are these crazy big athletes who can actually benefit you in the run game and pass game, to where are we moving from that versatility in 11 personnel with multiple wide receivers on the field to now 12 and 13 personnel to say, okay, we can pass out of this because our tight ends are crazy enough athletes. So they're still tough to cover, but we can also run out of it because these guys are 240, 250, 260 pounds instead of 200, 210, maybe 220 like wide receivers might be. So I guess to answer your question, like the Chiefs did this a lot last year. And I wonder if this is just a product of not having great receivers on the team, or if it was a hint in the direction that the league is going. Because the interesting part is McVay with the Rams, Shanahan with the Niners, and McDaniel with the Dolphins, they were 3 of the 4 teams who were like, they ran the least amount of pass plays out of heavier personnel. So are any of those coaches from the Shanahan tree, are they going to take a look at what Andy Reid was doing? And are they going to say, hey, let's actually steal a little bit of this because we think that we can run it too? That's something that I'm very curious with. That's the first offensive one. I mean, defensive one, I mean, there's so many great defensive coordinators just around the NFL. I mean, like what Mike Macdonald did last year with the Rams and just how he utilized a lot of different personnel is always fantastic to me to watch. Brian Flores and everything that he does basically in every stop that he has in his career is so unique. Vic Fangio is somebody whose defense I love to watch, and him now being the defensive coordinator in Philadelphia, what he gets to do with that front seven, guys like Jordan Davis, guys like Jalen Carter, how he's able to manipulate his front with two players like that. Those are defensive coordinators that I always kind of love to watch for a lot of different reasons because they feel very multiple enough to throw you a look that you would have never seen coming, or, having like unicorns on the team like Kyle Hamilton and Mike Macdonald, just using him perfectly to be a defensive player of the year candidate. Like that stuff is always fascinating to me. But then on the offensive side, yeah, I'm curious to see if this passing out of heavier personnel sets, is this going to become a league trend?
Trevor, maybe in a couple years, we'll look back and be like, how prescient is Trevor Sikkema? He called this. He's the Nostradamus of football. Look at that. That'd be amazing, dude. And I'm glad that it happened right here on the Big Blue Banter podcast. So Trevor, thank you so much for joining us. Please promote anything you need to promote, all your work. Where can people find it? Please, the floor is yours.
Sure. All the written work, it's list season. We're coming up the rankings of, all the positions and the position groups and everything in the NFL. We're doing that over at pff.com. For NFL draft, kind of my area of expertise, specifically the NFL Stock Exchange podcast and show on YouTube. We're getting through summer scouting. We've got quarterbacks and running backs already kind of worked through, and we're getting a wide receiver and tight end and offensive line. Then we'll flip over to the defensive side of the ball. We'll tell you who you need to watch for college football in terms of who are the big notable names for the 2025 NFL draft. So we will be doing that over on that channel if your listeners want to come watch after, of course, they watch and listen to this fantastic show.
Thank you so much, Trevor. And thank you everyone for listening to the Big Blue Banter podcast. Please, if you have not done so already, like, subscribe, comment on the podcast, and check us out wherever you get podcasts. Thank you everyone, and have a lovely day.